second home.
Okay, good evening, everybody. We are now live and welcome to the work session, the town board work session of Tuesday, November 1st. Happy November. Can I have a motion to open the meeting?
I move to open the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we are gonna start the meeting, hi everybody, with a discussion on downtown zoning, unless there's anything you wanted to mention first, Jill.
Nope.
Okay, so I wanted to put this on the agenda, sorry, it took a second. I wanted to put this on the agenda because we've been talking about this at a number of meetings. We are anticipating, I believe, having 50 North Greeley coming in the next maybe next week actually.
It's penciled for Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yep, right.
Yeah, for Wednesday, there's no meeting on Tuesday because it's election day. But we've been discussing sort of how we're moving forward with respect to public property. And I see Tom Curley from the planning board here. We talked about it with the planning board, and I know what we were initially thinking is we wanted to get input from residents, then turn that around into something that we can go out to ULI or somebody to really give us the pros and cons and the gives and takes of anything that we as a community might desire to see. So I know Sabrina, you were working on an initial RFP. I sort of wanted to see where that was going because I'd really like to move this along. I know things got there were other pressing, grant applications and things that had to get done. So do you want to
So
chime
right
in?
now, since the town board really hasn't given a direction on the RFP, we started out under one premise and you guys have kind of changed your tack a little bit. I have not been working on the RFP and I'm waiting for the town board to, all vote to give me direction to do that.
Well, I thought we gave direction after the last planning board meeting as to what we were doing.
No, there was not a consensus to take a direction, there was a lot of opinions.
No, I think we came up with something. I'm gonna look for it now and I will let you know because I think we should be drafting it, but we can talk to the board.
Well, regardless of what was said, I have not moved any further at compiling an RFP for a consulting firm for an outreach program. I think that's where you were heading. The question was, how broad of an outreach, what should it entail? And there was not, my listening to the meeting and follow through after the meeting, I was not tasked with furthering that RFP. So that's why it is before your board tonight, is my understanding.
Okay, all right, that was not my understanding. I had been told that it was just put on hold because you were looking at grant applications. So that being said, I'm glad I put this on the agenda because I wanna make sure this is moving forward now. So last thing I had, and we can discuss it with the board, we said a majority of the members of the town board and planning boards acknowledge a full-scale rezoning was not what we wanted or needed. We intended to reach out to all stakeholders. The town board will first look at public engagement through surveys, meetings, and mailers, and then we'll look to hire a group like ULI to bring our collective vision to life and to understand the feasibility of our top community wants. So what we are looking at is an RFP just to do some surveys, public engagements, meetings, mailers, to get people's ideas of what they want. And then we will be able to funnel that down into then meeting with a group like a ULI and saying, this is what the community wants, please look into the feasibility of all of this, and so we can see what we have the appetite for.
So I had an opportunity to actually go back over the meeting and listen from the meeting of September 20th, and I'm actually glad Tom's here because one of the things you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is not my area, is that he cautioned us that when we ask people what they want, we should be careful that it's not a pie in the sky sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So
It needs to be
before we ask
directed.
the question, we needed to set some parameters and some limitations on what we were considering, so that we didn't get pie in the sky and left field sort of things.
But that's
But
what the
that's
firm would
what they
do
would
and
help us
help
do.
us to whittle that down and to craft the questions appropriately. That's what a firm would do.
I
we're
think they need
asking-
to, I think we need to tell them where we wanna go, and I think that's the problem. Tom, forgive me if I've mischaracterized.
That's what we're gonna work with a firm with. We first need to hire that firm, who's then gonna go out and craft with us how we're going to go out to residents, what are the questions we're gonna ask? Are we having meetings? Are we having surveys? How is the best way to get this done? We need a firm to help us with that. I don't think it needs to be expensive. I don't think it's gonna be necessarily a super long process, but we need somebody to help us with that because we are not experts on the board as to how to lead that process.
Completely understand.
Can I jump in for a second?
Sure,
Yeah,
please.
so there's cart and then there's horse, and I think in this case, we certainly wouldn't be going out to the public with asking them, what they want. That's what we would work with firms to help us define. And so Tom's point is we've got to be, I think this was Tom's point, certainly was my opinion, is that we would have to be completely in control of the asks, right? In other words, we don't hire someone and then they go out, we define the scope. But before we can define the scope, we find the firm. The firm helps us think about the scope. So again, whether it was, that's to me what I think the marching orders are, right? We can't right now, sitting here, come up with all the questions to ask, then go find a firm with an RFP. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
Yeah,
And
in
I'm
order-
saying
and
colloquially,
to not be
one second.
repetitive,
Yeah.
that was my recollection
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So-
And so I'm kind of colloquially saying we wanna ask people what they want, but obviously we wanna do that in a directed and guided manner. We're not gonna just say, hey, what do you want? Because everyone's gonna say, I wanna put a town pool in the middle of town, and we know that that's not feasible. It might be somewhere else in town, but not necessarily on the publicly owned land. But certainly we want somebody to be able to guide us in that process so that we can ask questions that will elicit the most appropriate responses. And by appropriate, I mean ones that will lead us eventually to get to where we can figure out feasibility of people's wants.
As part of that, and Tom, you may be better equipped, one of the things I've voiced before, the concern was that sort of understanding what is possible and plausible as opposed to just a want, which I think everyone is now on the same page. But understanding what that means, so for example, if we use one of our parking lots, what does that mean for parking? What does that mean for access to the stores? What does that mean for off-street parking? So yes, this is all above our pay grade, but how do you construct that plausibility and feasibility and then the collateral consequences of that so that the community knows that this may be feasible, yes, it very well may be feasible, but you're going to have to give to get. And I don't know how you craft that, and I don't know if that's what ULI does, I don't know who does that.
So I think you're right, and I think it's a bifurcated process. First, we have to find out what the asks are and then determine the feasibility. Certainly, if we went out to the public and everyone said, we love the parking lot exactly as it is, we don't wanna change it at all, we wouldn't be studying the parking lot necessarily and the feasibility of keeping it exactly as it is. Obviously, I don't believe that that's going to be said, but I think it's a bifurcated process. First, we need to understand the wants of the community, and then we need to understand, well, what are the feasibility of those wants? And is it something that we have the appetite for? If we knew we wanted to put something on the train at the parking lot and we said, okay, well, that means, let's say, we're gonna need to build a parking garage, or we're gonna have to limit the number of spaces, or X, Y, or Z may happen. It's gonna cost this much and it's gonna increase this kind of traffic. That's to Chris's point, putting the cart before the horse, because we need to understand what the want is before we can determine its feasibility. So Sabrina, to answer your question, I think this RFP was for the first part of that process, to get a firm to do surveys and to figure out those wants, and then we're gonna take those, consolidate those, and then really figure out, well, what is the feasibility? Everybody wants a pool, let's say, well, what's the feasibility of putting that on town property?
Right, I'm perfectly comfortable putting together an RFP for what you are asking for. I just needed a solid direction from the town board to do so, because the last time I was putting together an RFP, it was for a charrette process.
Right, we had changed that at the last planning board meeting, the last joint meeting.
Right, I did not get clear direction at that meeting, so I apologize if I didn't understand, but I will be happy to pull together a draft RFP for the town board's review.
Okay, great, thank you. So how long do you think that generally takes? I know you also have other things on your plate. So
Right, I would say 2 weeks.
2 weeks, that's perfect. So then, maybe at our meeting,
The
I had some one other one more
second
question.
or the
maybe we could
29th?
quickly talk about it. We're trying to have
Yeah.
a short meeting on the 22nd because I know people may want to leave for Thanksgiving weekend. So we're trying to have just a short meeting. But maybe that's something we could talk about at that meeting.
Yeah, and also maybe something that maybe Sabrina can circulate it to the board and let the board members give some initial feedback before we actually meet and discuss about it. So
Yeah.
let's let me
Does that
put it
work,
tentatively,
Sabrina?
22nd, 29th.
Yeah, that is fine for me, you know, if you are wishing to discuss it at your meeting of the 22nd, I will try and get it to you by the 18th. That Friday, if you wanna hold it over and kind of each digest it yourselves and send me comments and do another go around, the pleasure is up to you.
Yep.
You know, the schedule.
Even if it's ready on the 15th, we can just circulate it so we can then.
As soon as it's ready, we circulate it to you, I'm not gonna hold it, no, send it to you on the 18th, but.
Okay.
You know.
Sabrina, does any of these organizations or firms help us, when I say craft, what we might want, meaning I don't know what's plausible, which is part of the conversation, but I'm also not that imaginative to understand what could be great and what's out there and what's available. So it's not just my ask, we're using the swimming pool example, I want a swimming pool. Will these firms help identify possibilities, if you will? Or is it just us to say we want A, B, and C, but it's kind of limited
You're
because we're not
asking-
experienced
you're-
enough to know all the things that might be terrific and a good fit.
I can't answer that, you're talking two different processes there. You're talking about somebody who is going to help you do outreach, identify the questions, you're asking the public, narrow down the field. On the other hand, Jeremy, you're asking for people to understand kind of what you can and cannot do, the limitations that currently exist.
It's not even just the limitations, it's just of concepts and ideas, once in the past that we had discussed, I don't remember what it was, but having people come in and look at our property and say, these are ideas. Not that we're selling or leasing or anything like that, but to give the concept.
Like
So,
RF.
I
Like
think
a planning firm
but I
you're
mean, I do
talking about.
think, from my understanding,
So,
the
let me just-
ULI can do something.
Yeah, so that's terrific, because I think that's a critical piece, it's, not everyone here is smart enough and smart enough is not the right word, but has the experience enough to know what's available for the community, benefit the community, so.
Okay, so does that seem good?
I'll give it a try.
Alright,
Thanks, Sabrina.
thank you very much.
Sure.
Alright, did anyone have anything else on that? So let's move to sewers in Millwood. So I think Jeremy and I have been kind of enmeshed in this for quite a while. I don't think anyone else currently on the board actually has been. And I thought it would be helpful, the Millwood West End advisory board asked me about this the other day as well. We were talking about it. So I thought it might be time to kind of give everybody an update as to where we were. I know we it's not moving forward right now, really. I know Kern and Woodard, I think, did a summary of it for us, or Woodard and Kern, thank you. So do you wanna give us sort of an update
Sure.
for the rest of the board and then let us know your thoughts as to next steps?
So I'm gonna give you a summary of Woodard and Kern's 2018 report. It was circulated and I believe it was included as part of the packet. I'm gonna kind of give you the highlights of that report, which will help characterize where we stand with sewers in Millwood. Just to kind of familiarize folks, the report really identified physical and economic feasibility of implementing sanitary sewers in the Millwood hamlet. Both for the existing uses and potential future uses. Woodard and Kern is an engineering firm that specializes in water and wastewater, so they have a solid foundation of this type of work. So we hired them in 2018. The data and the numbers that I'm going to speak about today are from 2018. They really examined two different sewer connections. They were looking at what's called a gravity-fed sewer line, a force main, and a pump station to carry the wastewater from the Millwood hamlet to the Yonkers wastewater treatment plant down in Yonkers, New York. There were three options. There was a connection to an existing sewer in the town of Austining. There was construction of new sewer lines along the Sawmill River Parkway that connected to a Westchester County trunk sewer. And at the time that this report was being prepared, there was a sewer line that was being planned for the Random Farms subdivision, which has since been terminated, right? So out of the three options, two of them are still valid. The third is no longer happening because it has been terminated. The study looked at capturing 84 residential units in Pheasant Run. So Pheasant Run is really not part of the Millwood hamlet, it's just outside the Millwood hamlet, but the town, working with Woodard and Kern, asked them to include it because it is 84 single-family residences on a package treatment system where they would benefit from a community sewer. Basically, the study determined wastewater flow by use. So it looked at the residential uses in the hamlet, it looked at the commercial uses in the hamlet, and it looked at the industrial uses in the hamlet. And the intention was to come up with an adjusted daily water usage rate by use to apply the 10 state standards, which is a known engineering reference, when you're planning sewer systems. The study had to identify the daily water usage and what's called a peaking factor. So there's calculations that once you understand the daily water usage, you then calculate a peaking factor to begin to build a sewer system. The study identified 28 properties in the Millwood hamlet that are used for residential purpose and had a peak hourly flow of 24,780 gallons per day. 14 properties in the hamlet were used for commercial use, with a peak hourly flow of 33,600 gallons per day. 8 properties in the hamlet are used for industrial uses, with 11,760 gallons per day as their annual peak hourly flow. Pheasant Run, again outside of the hamlet, was also calculated at 41,160 gallons per day of peak annual flow. This is the existing flow. It's not planned future flow, but the existing flow. So once they identified the flows, they started to design the system. The system that Woodard and Kern designed had approximately 9,100 linear feet of a gravity sewer. There was an 8-inch diameter main, and the size of the main was not dictated by the amount of flow, but the environmental conditions. There needed to be a 4% slope on the pipe in order to transport the sewage from one point to another. So the 8-inch diameter pipe was the minimum size required in order to make this or allow the sewer system to flow. There were approximately 42 sewer manholes planned, and then there were the individual sewer laterals which were connected to each of the properties. Based on the known engineering standards for sewer design, the system that was planned for the Millwood hamlet would handle 415,000 gallons per day of wastewater. This is greater than the amount that is currently needed in the hamlet, but because again the design, it had to be a minimum of 415,000 gallons, where we were estimating 111,300 gallons per day by use. So the study focused on was focused on connecting the sewers to the Random Farms project. Because that project did not go through, there was a whole section of sewer main and pumps equating to $7.5 million that did not get built. That price tag of $7.5 million is added to the cost of the actual sewering of the hamlet. So in total, without Random Farms, with the sewer system that was designed for Millwood Hamlet, we're looking at $14.6 million.
And that's
For
2018 prices,
Yes.
correct?
That is
Yes.
2018 prices. Now, Woodard and Curran in their report developed what is called an equivalent dwelling unit analysis. So they looked at all of the properties, all of the uses, and they started to look at if the residential use, the single family use, was assigned a wastewater flow in an equivalent dwelling unit, they would be looking at 200 gallons per day, right? If there's a factor, an engineering factor that requires dividing that 200 gallons per day by the existing flow of 16,700 gallons per day, which would then equate to what's considered 84 equivalent dwelling units. So that would get tacked on to the residential use. You would do the same thing for the commercial use and the industrial use. You would adjust it based on actual usage. Ultimately, the hamlet needed 133 economic development units. This would equate, given the $14.6 million price point, of $109,774.43 per economic development unit. It's worth noting that today a benefit unit fee over $40,000 is typically not feasible. So what we have here is a very, very expensive project based on the existing uses in the hamlet. There was talk at the time of how much future development you would need in order to make that project feasible. It requires more. At that time, it was decided it required more than was tolerable in the hamlet by folks. So that was kind of the last discussion we had about sewers in Millwood, and primarily because the Random Farms project did not come to fruition. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, so Sabrina, this is, the first time I've looked at these numbers and these figures, so just let me know if I'm making a correct assessment here. It looks like, so we have 133 EDUs, and to make it economically feasible, you would have a sort of forced development scenario where you would need an additional, I guess, roughly 100 EDUs to make it close to the approximate typical cost of $30,000 to $40,000. And is that, am I reading it correctly?
You would actually need a little bit more than 100 units or 100 EDUs, but yes,
this is a rough
thinking,
estimate,
right.
yeah, it's like
Yeah, you're-
190 to 254, so I'm just giving a rough average there.
Yeah, I think that the way you're approaching it is correct, yes.
But that is assuming a 30-year bond term at 3%, the expense of that, that's a pretty low.
Well, that's just to correct so that is just to construct the sewers, there's no numbers in there regarding maintenance of the sewers,
Right, but I'm actually looking at the cost to residents at this point, that benefit fee in taxation, that's really what I'm looking at. And if you look at a 30-year bond at 3%, we're higher than 3% now. So that, it's going to be even more than what these estimates are. I mean, you have to start looking at least at 4%. And if you're looking at like 7.1 million, is that
I think we're looking at 14 million.
Yeah, so
14? Yeah, so you have to assume an extra percentage point is quite significant if you spread that over just the 133 units. I mean, these are basically single family houses that we're looking at right now. And I'm not sure how, we did have a proposal for the Millwood lumberyard, and I'm not even sure if that was rentals or condos, but I'm not
They
sure
were-
how
They
rental
were looking at a
units,
packaged wastewater treatment plant and talking about what the needed capacity for their project would be and how much additional capacity they would have to lend to the hamlet.
right, so
They
that
were
was,
look,
okay.
yeah,
I'm
they
just,
were looking at sewering.
yeah, I'm just looking at spreading the cost to residents, but and whether developments like that would be helpful, but that would also add to the, you know, the
Developments like that would be helpful in that they're adding to the vitality of the hamlet and they're at a scale that I think may or may not be tolerable as compared to what would be needed to build the actual sewer system. But that has not been proven out. You know, we need to ask that applicant to do a hard dive and help us understand how that package plant would work, what their minimum needs would be compared to what capacity they could offer to the rest of the hamlet.
But I guess just the point about the report is that there's the actual cost to construct, then there's the annual cost.
Right.
Which is a
O&M.
combination of debt service, even
Yes.
if we were to get grants, there's still gonna be debt service at a precipitously higher interest rate plus ongoing operation and maintenance fees. Absent significant development, it's gonna be a substantial amount, is I guess the bottom line.
and that's gonna
Correct.
fall on homeowners.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's a significant ask. I don't think it's feasible.
We would end up in a situation where the state controller would need to approve it and he would not.
Right.
Sabrina,
He would not, you said?
Probably
No.
not.
He would not.
And what's the, I don't know, Rob, if you can figure out, so 14 million in 2018 would equate to what do you think now?
At least 20.
It's hard to know because I think some of the construction materials are probably exceeding the 8% inflation that we have right now, so it
Right.
would really be difficult to tell.
But it's gotta be at least 20
I
or
would probably
20.
say 20. I mean, you know, we look at the downtown and what we estimated that at and what it finally came in at, and that wasn't, you know, we encountered some difficulties along the way with excavation, with soil that had to be removed, et cetera. I don't know if that's accounted for in this estimate. It probably is at some point in the contingency or wherever, but it could exceed that too. So, yeah, I think, and you know, like Sabrina says, the typical cost if it's over $909 a year, the state controller would have to approve it. And, you know, we're talking, even if we had random farms in here, that would equate to $2,000 a year, which is almost double what the state controller would approve. You pull that out and you can't see, that's a burden on residents.
Significant burden,
Sabrina,
yeah.
question, I think last year with the East of Hudson monies and working with Mount Kisco, we tied in for some residents to get access to
Riverwoods.
to get access to sewers, and we try to get Kisco Park in. Unfortunately, if I recall, Mount Kisco did not wanna go that route. But ultimately, what dollars, if any, have we pursued to try to offset these costs? Are there any grants? Are there, you know, what?
Well, yeah, listen, we have not tried to pursue grants to sewer Millwood.
Is there-
You know, we attempted all sorts of funding to divert random farms and riverwoods. Each time we were needing separate controller approval, it was beyond what is normally accepted. And it was very difficult, and it wasn't until New York City DEP and Riverwoods, you know, claimed that they needed to upgrade their plant, and then we were able to work an arrangement with the village of Mount Kisco because of their proximity to Mount Kisco's trunk line.
So, but are there any grant monies available that you were aware of, or are there anything that can offset these costs that we should look into and pursue, or?
At this time, the costs are so outrageous, I don't know if we would be able to obtain that much money to make this happen.
And
Because I
Jeremy,
think even-
typically, we have to be quite a ways down the road with the design in order to apply for these monies. We've seen this in a couple instances here that we've been held up with some things, the PER, for example,
Right.
that there were a couple of grants that we were looking for and we just didn't have the baseline document for it yet to even ask for it, so
Gotcha.
there could be buckets of money out there, but right now we've determined it's not feasible and really for us to go down the road and complete the plans for this for something that's not feasible unless we had a significant share of the funding for it. It's
And what about the Environmental Bond Act that we just passed a resolution on last week? Would that have any impact?
I suppose it could. I mean, I think we heard last week, there's kind of very broadly defined buckets of money right now that are not, you know, they're not narrowly defined and we don't know exactly who might qualify for it, but they did, you know, suggest, I think there's gonna be, you know, social justice communities were gonna have a better opportunity at some of that, and I don't know that we qualify.
I mean, Woodard goes through some of the options, New York Clean Water Grant, DEC Water Quality Community Block Development Grant
Yep.
Program.
Yeah,
Right,
I know
and
how
so
much-
in 2018, there was a shift between 2018 and today. Many of those programs are directly through EFC under the Water Resources Improvement Act and other funding that EFC is administrating for the governor, or the consolidated funding application. And it has shown that our experience, particularly in the past several rounds, is, as Rob was saying, we need to have more detailed plans. There's very little money for planning, but a lot of money if you have a shovel-ready project.
And actually,
And-
Sabrina, if you recall, with our infrastructure project, we did get monies for our sanitary sewer. Again, shovel-ready project, we were ready to go on it, we had awarded the bids. And at the 11th hour, we received several $100,000 that was able to offset some of the cost of that, but that was actually sanitary sewer. But that was replacing an existing sanitary sewer that literally was rotting from the inside and out. We've got tremendously acidic
we-
soils here. Yeah, I'm sorry, Sabrina.
Well, no, we had an engineer's report,
Sure,
we had
the
actual
plans.
design plans and
Yes.
specs. For Millwood sewers, this report, the sewer feasibility analysis is all that we have at this point in time. And it shows that it's going to be very costly.
I was just noting that each of the grant opportunities that Woodard and Curran references have, to your point, Jill, significant conditions, limitations, prerequisites that
Yeah.
are probably gonna be extremely difficult.
And I have to tell you that Millwood is disadvantaged in the grant application process because it doesn't have a transit hub. So when grant evaluators are taking a look at the potential for development in an area, one of the things they're looking at is, well, in Millwood, how would people get to where they need to be? How would people get into the city? And if you're limited to, cars, that's a problem. And that's why, I believe that one of the reasons why the Chappaqua Hamlet infrastructure project was actually able to get funding was that we've got a railroad connection here, we've got buses going through it, so there is a transit hub. And that definitely makes you, more attractive when you're looking for grant funding and development along the way.
But what about from another angle, from the environmental point of view, what about the impact on watershed areas? How does
Well,
Millwood
Millwood is not,
affect that?
how much of Millwood is in the watershed, Sabrina?
It goes through, there's a portion of it, but not the most dense portion of commercial use is outside of the New York City watershed. And that watershed has more heft than, let's say, the Indian Brook watershed or the Sawmill watershed, because New York City, it's New York City's drinking watershed. But I'd say not even a quarter of Millwood is in that watershed, where there's existing concentration of development.
And looking at a couple of these funding sources they recommend, the CDBG, for the reasons that Jill said, we don't qualify for those. The Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund, we're a AAA rated municipality, so that's typically just a loan at the lowest market rates, and we get that. So, and I think, Jill, we do have a grant application right now with the WIIA, right?
Right, we
Is that the roof or the pump station?
No, the WIA is what we got for downtown
No, right now, we are waiting to hear whether or not we received funding under WIA for the Bedford pump station.
Bedford pump station, I'm sorry, right.
Yeah, we have an ING grant for the roof
Right.
at the treatment plant.
Sorry. The acronyms you're getting to.
All right, thank you, that's very,
Thanks,
very
Sabrina.
informative. Any other questions? All right, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thanks, Sabrina.
You're welcome, have a good night.
You too, thanks so much.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
So the next thing on our agenda for the work session was, we had written it as the statewide proposition number 1, the Environmental Bond Act, just the cover letter. And as Lisa pointed out to me today, we should wait for this until after the election, because if the Environmental Bond Act does not pass, then there's no reason for us to write a cover letter about how we think the money should be spent.
Yes.
So although we're all tremendously optimistic for the outcome, we're gonna hold on this one a little bit.
Makes sense.
But I do have a substitution, so it shouldn't be a total loss. What you'll find in your packets is a resolution in support of Assembly Bill A9079 and with the corresponding Senate Bill S8378, which is amending the environmental conservation law by adding a new section that pertains to local freshwater, wetlands and pesticide prohibition. The board had previously reviewed this legislation and was in favor of it, and what we had been waiting for the ERB's blessing, I suppose, to be able to issue a resolution in support. We've received that from the chair. John Rosenblum was very kind and sent an email in support of the legislation, explaining it to us. So I feel comfortable forwarding this to the board for their formal action on the resolution, and we should be able to forward this to Assemblyman Burdick, who's one of the sponsors.
And the form of this resolution is something that other municipalities in Westchester have adopted, so I feel very comfortable with this form.
Is it in our resolution?
Oh, I'm sorry, and Pete Harker, yep.
I believe it is.
Yes, it's loose, it's just a loose.
It's right here.
It's not in the,
It's a separate
it's
paper.
standalone.
See
A
it?
standalone, okay.
Oh, did you need a copy of
didn't
it?
get this one.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Not a problem.
No, I can't see.
Does everyone have
I think you just had it physically
Yeah.
here.
Right, it was in the,
Yeah.
yes.
Is that your copy?
Yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't in the PDF.
Okay, we didn't all get a copy, that was.
So if everybody is it's pretty straightforward, so if everybody's okay with this, I thought it would be nice to get this done and get this up to
To Chris
all
and
the-
Pete.
Sure. All right, well, we don't have to, we don't need to adopt it today, if everyone's just seeing it now, we can do that next week, but
Seems
you're-
good to me, but we can.
if you're comfortable with it, I'd love to get that done today.
Take a moment, read.
I support this, so.
Yep.
I don't have any further questions.
Anyone
Freshwater
have any issues
wetland
with it?
protection, I'm all.
Okay, perfect,
We've got some
All right,
exceptions
great.
that are important, so perfect.
perfect, yes, I
Thanks.
believe it is very important.
Alright, so we'll leave it, we can do it now, we can leave it for the proposed actions at the end of the meeting.
Great.
We can just do it all at the end.
Okay, that's great.
Alright, so next up, you're up, is an update from our Committee on Race, Equity and Inclusion. I'm gonna let Vicky kind of introduce you, but just really quickly, I wanted to say we're excited to have you here. We're glad that we know you've been working really hard as our newly formed committee and there's been a lot kind of thrown on your laps. So on behalf of the board, I wanna thank you. And you're doing very important work, so take it away, Vicky.
Okay, well, I'm going to let the co-chairs introduce the whole committee. But I just wanted to say that this committee was seated in November towards the beginning of the summer. And that's usually a time when committees slow down on their work. So I just want to say that this committee has been hard at work, doing a lot of performing a lot of tasks in the background, including reviewing almost 130 recommendations from the original Council on Race and Equity, which has been, to honor their work. It was very important, but it's been a lot of work in the background, in addition to coming forward with new initiatives and new ideas, and of course, a mission statement. And we'll see all of that today. But I just want to commend the committee for a tremendous amount of work that's been done so far. And we welcome you, and we're really excited to hear about everything that's been going on with the CREI.
Perfect.
So I guess I'll introduce that for Superna Banjari, who's a co-chair, along with Larry Liu. So welcome. You have the floor.
So, good evening, everyone. As Vicky said, I'm Shaporna Banerjee, and I'm very happy to be here tonight with my co-chair, Larry, to share with the town board a summary of the work of the Committee on Race, Equity, and Inclusion over the past couple of months. Our committee of 7 has been meeting regularly since we were seated in the spring, discussing the formulation of and how to best implement the CREI's mission. We each have unique links in the Newcastle community. Among us, we have long-time and recently arrived residents, working and retired with varied professional backgrounds, and some with children in the district. So our essential focus as a committee has been on expanding the sense of belonging and community in our town, of celebrating and creating a welcoming environment for all the residents of Newcastle.
This community focus drives our work thus far and plans moving forward. The minutes from our meetings are available for those interested in more details, and we believe that they reflect the robust discussions, a plethora of ideas that have been brought to the table over the past few months. Before we begin our presentation, we want to extend our gratitude to the town board for the opportunity to engage in this important work on diversity and inclusion, and to Vicky in particular for her support and guidance and her commitment to this effort. So thank you everyone, and thank Kim, Sean, and Pat here as well, and also the committee members. Okay, so the mission statement of ours is the mission of the Town of Newcastle Committee on Race, Equity, and Inclusion is to build and sustain a community that is racially, culturally, and socially integrated and inclusive, where equity for all is the norm. And the CREI's mission is based on the belief that a clear commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is paramount to the growth and health of our community. In furtherance of this mission, we will promote a trusted environment where we listen to, support, and learn from marginalized voices and create partnerships that will allow us to uniformly represent the interests of all within our community, reflecting our shared ideals. So, as you notice, probably I'm not the best speaker, so if you cannot hear me clearly, just let me know, I will slow it down, okay? So that's the mission statement.
Can we go to the next slide, please?
Superna, tilt the microphone a little bit down to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we wanted to review some of the CREI recent accomplishments. So the primary focus of our committee has been to review and carry forward the recommendations of the previous Council on Race and Equity, which were the result of the hard work and dedication of over 100 town residents. We want to acknowledge the depth of their research and the thoughtfulness that went into this work. We had the opportunity to speak with Nichelle Maynard Elliott to discuss our questions around the recommendations and her thoughts on how to lead our community in centering diversity and inclusion. We are grateful to her and Zabeen Mirza and all of the previous CRE participants for creating the bedrock for this work. Our presentation today will include a detailed review of the CRE recommendations, and will cover the CRE committee's priorities that are our committee's priorities that are directly drawn from them that we will pursue moving forward. So in addition to the work on the previous CRE recommendations, the CREI has focused on sharing information and responding to events in and around our community. We created and shared a spotlight on the history and importance of Juneteenth in the town newsletter. The CREI issued a statement with the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee expressing solidarity with protesters in Iran. After an incident in the Chappaqua Bank of America parking lot that was shared on our local group on Facebook, the CREI issued a statement condemning prejudiced behavior in our town. The committee has also worked on outreach, tabling and taking signups for volunteers and ideas for CREI's works from local residents. We had a table at the CPTA Diversity Committee's Fall Family Gathering event, which was held at Greeley, and we're able to partner with them as a co-sponsor, providing the funds for the taiko drumming group that performed at the event. And finally, the CREI co-sponsored the Hispanic Heritage Concert held at the Chappaqua Library. Sorry, next slide, please.
Okay, so the CREI current initiatives are implementation of the previous CRE recommendations, cultural calendar of holidays and events, community-wide annual event starting in spring 2023, business and affinity group directory, building additional partnerships, flyers, and social media presence, recurring regular newsletter items, continued updates for the town board. As noted earlier, we will now move into the next slide, please. Move into a review of previous CRE recommendations, which we will share by category, each followed by a summary of the recommendations that the CREI plans to carry forward, in addition to the current initiatives that I have just outlined. Starting with the recommendations for business by the previous CRE. The first recommendation is update the Town of Newcastle procurement policy and procedures to include guidelines that allow the participation for BIPOC and women-owned services in the bidding process. Second, utilize Chappaqua Farmers Market as a pop-up marketplace for BIPOC and women-owned business. 3. Develop Chappaqua Hub with a clear mission to act as a liaison between landlords, town administration, and BIPOC and women-owned businesses. 4. Expand the current cultural events roster for the town of Newcastle by offering art, music, culturally diverse cuisine. 5. Create town video of the beautiful Newcastle hamlet, showcasing restaurants, shops, parks, recreation. Use video as a social media, town newsletter, and a local magazine tool to promote Newcastle tourism. 6. Promote interesting programs such as Chappaqua Scavenger Hunt, shop around town and spend a day in Chappaqua to increase tourism. 7. Create opportunities for BIPOC brick and mortar shops and restaurants. So after the review, the business priorities that for the current CREI are the following. The CREI encouraged the town board to update the town's Newcastle procurement policy and procedures to include guidelines that promote the participation of BIPOC and women-owned services in the bidding process. The town board will work closely with the legal counsel to ensure the guideline is legal and does not compromise the quality of the products and services to the town. Second, the CREI will prioritize collaborating with the Chappaqua Farmers Market as a pop-up marketplace for BIPOC and women-owned businesses. The CREI will approach the Chamber of Commerce to create a volunteer advocacy group to encourage BIPOC and women-owned businesses in Newcastle. So the next slide is the recommendation for communication by the previous CRE. 1, Anti-Racism Handbook. Each chapter devoted to a word relating to racism. Communicate the complexity of racism, educate the reader about racism's more nuanced aspects, and encourage self-reflection. Publish book online and also distribute hard copies. possible handbook for children aged 6 to 12. Second, newsletter. Distribute hard copy-based and e-newsletter to educate the community about CRE activities. Educate community about anti-racism. Give voice to BIPOC community and those engaged in anti-racism activities. E-newsletter and a quarterly hard copy newsletter. Number 3, social media. Use it as a tool for communication, organizing an effort to transform and interrupt cultural racism by reaching out to the Newcastle community and beyond, building relationships, sharing information, and educating the community. Streamline the process, content, editing, approval, design, and uploading for fast turnout. The priorities are the communication priorities that the current CREI come up with. Number 1, the CREI will pursue the recommendation to produce content to be included in the Town of Newcastle newsletter, giving a wide range of voices to the BIPOC community in Newcastle and to those who build bridges to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number 2, the CREI will also pursue the recommendation to build a social media presence to reach out to the Newcastle community and beyond to share information and advocate for the BIPOC community.
All right, so now we'll move on to the CRE education recommendations. So first we have inclusive language, K through 12, reevaluate use of term African American versus Black. 2, require CCSD employees to include gender pronouns in all school emails and communications to parents. 3, CCSD employee photos and staff directory to encourage parent-teacher relationships. 4, CCSD to hire a team of DEI facilitators to support Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Wellness. 5, staff implicit bias professional learning. 6, DEI events for students and parents throughout school year. 7, expand Unity Day to middle school. 8, additional restorative justice practices and code of conduct. 9, implement challenge days as set of activities challenging students to examine topics of race and discrimination. 10, foster in-school race-based affinity groups for BIPOC students. 11, blind grading and anonymizing all exams and assignments to eliminate implicit bias. Remove names and digitize assignments to avoid identification based on handwriting. 12, develop more extensive application and more training for peer leadership to better manage bias, discrimination, and mental health. 13, BIPOC peer leadership recruitment. 14, BIPOC peer leadership pairing. Give BIPOC students, you go back one, thank you. Give BIPOC students option to be assigned to BIPOC peer mentors. 15, BOE committee to have BIPOC student representatives. 16, introduce student awards named after accomplished BIPOC academic achievers and leaders. 17, implement BIPOC biography presentations around BIPOC historical figures in multiple disciplines. 18, participate in biliteracy program and introduce benchmark language attainment awards and put official seal on diplomas. 19, Indigenous peoples land acknowledgement. 20, apply multicultural lens to curriculum. 21, add ethnic studies course offerings. 22, create BIPOC alumni network. 23, appoint student representative to serve on BOE. 24, edit student code of conduct and policies to emphasize CCSD commitment to diversity and equity. 25, publicly release non-identifiable annual data on disciplinary decisions regarding use of slurs and defamatory incidents. 26, training for all substitutes on racial literacy and cultural competency. 27, recruit BIPOC student teachers. 28, form staff and faculty of color affinity groups. 29, establish anonymous notification system to inform parents of incidents of discrimination and harassment. 30, administrators as teachers. Have principals, assistant principals, and administrators teach, co-teach, and participate in classes every semester. 31, cultivate meaningful relationships between principals, assistant principals, and students by facilitation of small group conversations to support friendly environment. 32, community building exercise. Students, faculty, and staff to write anonymous letters in last week of school to unknown member with whom they will share a building with the following year. So from those recommendations, the CREI chose these as their education priorities, our education priorities. A significant number of the previous CRE recommendations around education, we just wanted to acknowledge that these fall under the purview of the CCSD, and many have been addressed in discussions prior to this committee's formation. So in terms of our priorities, the CREI will focus on sharing information with the community to promote equity and inclusion through newsletter items and giving voice to the BIPOC community. The committee will also expand our social media presence, as we mentioned earlier, as a tool for communication, education, and organizing, recognizing that this will require a dedicated team of volunteers to keep content current and ensure effective outreach. The CREI will also revisit the concept of an anti-racism handbook, reviewing existing material and refining the intended audience.
The event recommendations by the previous CRE. Number 1, a 2020 virtual event, virtual internship, community service fair, cooking with Q, community scene. 2021 live event, community-wide festival that brings the CRE pillars to life, interactive age-appropriate activities and workshops, appeals to families and students and individuals, help us move forward, toward an anti-racist lifestyle. Number 3, timing for the event, 1 or 2 days in spring or fall 2021. Regarding press and marketing, brand positioning, position Town of Newcastle as a community that welcomes, supports, and celebrates BIPOC families and is committed to building an anti-racist and racially equitable environment. Press, leverage Town's PR team to generate pre- and post-event press, including broadcast, print, digital, and influencer pickup. The recommendation related marketing and the recommendation related outdoor events, light street banners, South Greeley street banner, lawn signs, triangle signs and flyers. Regarding digital media, the social media posts, ads, influencers, and editorials. Regarding print media, edit pickup, local ads. It's all right. I have another copy. Apologize for the technical difficulty. Not very good with Apple computers. Number 5, local business CRE training and workshop. Social media wall. Increase positive imagery, visual town support of racial equality among community members. The strategy is to provide an interactive and exciting new attraction for students, families, and individuals. Create a positive moment that becomes viral through social media. And a recommendation regarding activations, looking for town partners, which may include Austining and Mount Kisco through cross promotion. And partnership with library, for example, story times, kids craft, book club, and park recreation, story walk, store displays, interfaith collaboration with interfaith organizations, for example, BIPOC guest speakers, music guests, and exhibits, food establishment, dish specials with historical heritage reference, art culture that include performers, films, and artists. Number 17, town proclamation, promotion. Follow the example of Maplewood. Maplewood created a proclamation to kick off each Awareness Month, which was read at their town meeting. Newcastle may need to involve more of the community to get investment and excitement started for each Awareness Month. For example, read a proclamation in front of town hall, invite different local representatives. For example, Girl and Boy Scouts, school chorus to perform. Incentivize participation that include high school and middle school students. Unit garden, gardening space. New families moving into 54 Hunts Place can have an opportunity to garden using the Unity Gardens. Work group goal, identify existing events, programs in the community which could benefit from racial equity lens and the CRE support. And in the recommendation, identify the events and programs for collaboration that include Chappaqua Book Festival, Chappaqua Craft and Gift Fair, Chappaqua School Foundation, Art Around Town. The events priorities identified by the CREI are the following. The CREI will organize an annual event in the spring that celebrates diversity, equity, and inclusion. The event will be modeled after Community Day, bringing together our diverse cultures and promoting unity among Newcastle residents. The CREI will work with the town board to encourage private and business sponsorship so that the community will take ownership of the event and will lessen the budgetary burden on local residents. Second, the CREI has worked with Town Library and PTA to co-sponsor events to promote race, equity, and inclusion. The CREI will continue the efforts to welcome diverse businesses and residents. The next is the housing recommendation by the previous CRE. Number 1, implement the form-based code, increase affordable housing required in form-based code from 10% to 15%. Incorporate multilingual signs throughout the town. Provide training opportunities for realtors regarding implicit bias and promote racial diversity. Assist with targeted advertising to underrepresented racial and ethnic groups in real estate. Mystery shoppers to assess real estate trends and strategies. Committees to ensure no special permits are issued under the form-based code, and practical problems faced by the residents such as the lack of generators, Wi-Fi issues to be considered before construction, approval to help ensure equal access and social equity. Town pool, a community pool will promote gathering of Newcastle residents with diverse backgrounds. Private clubs may be cost prohibitive, and having a town pool will allow Newcastle to serve a diverse community. Number 8, current private pool clubs to allow non-bond holding family membership at a reduced rate to allow residents with limited resources to take advantage of the local pools. Number 9, create a liaison group to share idea an open channel of communication with state, federal lawmaker. Number 10, town planner staff to hold monthly open session via Zoom for community discussion and question and answers. Number 11, creation of housing and planning committee to review existing zoning code, recommend updates, and support affordable housing planning in Newcastle. Number 12, implementation of planned and scheduled review and revision of FBC to ensure new voices and new ideas are heard and continued engagement of town. Number 13, creation of affordable housing trust or fund to provide different avenues to donate and or dispose property and raise funds. Utilization of the funds to be specified for affordable housing. Number 14, create a new town position or agency dedicated to CRE issues, including housing and planning, in order to further its work on diversity and inclusion, solidify town's long-term commitment to the cause. Number 15, free busing for town recreation activities for qualified students to ensure town sports activities are enjoyed by diverse group of residents. Many programs already offer busing for nominal fees through town. Number 16, allowance of homes in excess of 4,000 square feet and 4 acres by right transfer into two-family homes. Removal or limitation of size of accessory unit to 1,000 square feet to allow SFC to have rental units. Number 18, town webpage update to include and specify information regarding residential ADA or age-in-place local business compliance. Number 19, workshops for commercial property and store owners to ensure ADA compliance. Number 20, placement of signs or historical markers to indicate historical context to Newcastle, land, and the role of BIPOC residents. Number 21, review and update Part 2 General Legislation Chapter 78, Housing Discrimination, to include protection for age, gender identity, handicap, service in the U.S. Armed Forces, sex, sexual orientation, or victims of domestic abuse. The housing priorities come up provided by the current CREI. Number 1, the CREI encouraged the town board to consider affordable housing as a priority. The CREI will not specify a percentage. The criterion is that the town board will create a program that successfully integrates residents of affordable housing into a welcoming community. The CREI believes the town board needs to be given the flexibility to find appropriate tools to satisfy the needs for affordable housing. Number 2, the CREI encourages the town board to consider incorporating the idea behind the recommendation of multilingual signs throughout the town by exploring alternatives that can be easily implemented. For example, the town could provide options to incorporate multilingual messages on digital signs or in digital messages when the context is appropriate. Next, the CREI encourages the town board to consider creating a town pool if an appropriate opportunity arises, or purchasing an existing club to fulfill this function. The town pool could be an excellent addition to the community if it does not place substantial tax burden on residents and does not hurt existing private pool clubs. The CREI encourages the town board to establish channels of communications with state and federal lawmakers so that the town board can effectively advocate for Newcastle communities regarding housing and other issues. The CREI encourages the town board or staff to host open sessions via Zoom for community discussions and question and answers on an as-needed basis. The open session will be an opportunity for the community to provide suggestions and ideas to town planners regarding zoning codes and affordable housing plans in Newcastle. The CREI encourages the town board to work closely with APIC, Americans with Disability Act, ADA issues, and the CREI will be a close ally when needed. The CREI encourages the town board to work closely with the Historical Society to create an online interactive map of Newcastle that shows landmarks of the town, the historical context, and the contribution by BIPOC residents to be included on the town website. The CREI encourages the town board to review and update Part 2 General Legislation Chapter 78 Housing Discrimination to expand the protection if it is not legally redundant and does not de-emphasize the protection based on race. The CREI encourages the town board to talk to the community and collect data to find out if there are opportunity of substantial private donations for creating a donation trust that supports low-income housing.
Great, so then we'll move on to the outreach priorities. The outreach recommendations from the previous CRE. So 1, revision of town website to be more diverse and inclusive. 2, plan a new look feel for the town website. 3, have a dedicated staff to maintain and keep the town websites updated and current, including chapqua.com, and manage comments, etc. There should be a corresponding site for Millwood as discoverchapqua.com. 5, a neighborhood pod to enhance the safety and well-being of all residents, primarily BIPOC families. This would include a CRE neighborhood pod toolkit with instructions for residents to create an official pod, obtain training, and link with CRE. Create Newcomers Club of Newcastle to provide a means to obtain information for new residents. 7, school ambassadors to work in tandem with the education team in welcoming new BIPOC families and students and serve as a liaison for current BIPOC students. Moving to the next slide, please. 8, establish outreach booth at Chappaqua Farmers Market on Saturdays. 9, devise some metrics to calculate the number of site visitors and new site visitors, what pages were visited on each of these website pages. 10, create a permanent CRE office. 11, participate in organizing events throughout the year, including but not limited to Community Day, Farmers Market, Annual Book Fair, also partnering with the library and other groups for additional events at the library or the Chappaqua PAC, among others. 12, have annual events for new families, such as international food dinners, picnics, music, etc. 13, amend the town website to add a section for new residents containing all of the information they will need, a directory of BIPOC-owned businesses, and resources for children and teens. So from these, the CREI has established the following outreach recommendations. The CREI will pursue the recommendation to revise the town website to be more diverse and inclusive, with a corresponding suggestion that the town allocate dedicated staff to manage this effort, as ongoing maintenance and updates will be required. Revisions would aim to elevate visibility of the CREI's work on the homepage, as well as including a section for new residents featuring a directory of BIPOC-owned businesses and highlighting resources available for children and teens. The committee will also prioritize community outreach by maintaining a presence at events where Newcastle residents regularly gather, such as Community Day and the Farmers Market, with the goal of sharing information about committee initiatives and events and inviting participation from residents. The CREI has established a connection with the Chappaqua Library and looks forward to partnering with them to bring relevant speakers and events to the community. We will seek additional opportunities for similar partnerships that will take advantage of town resources, such as the Chappaqua Performing Arts Center. And finally, we look forward to establishing annual events celebrating Newcastle residents' diverse backgrounds and experiences, including the planned annual Spring Festival. So this covers the previous CRE partnership recommendations. So 1, sponsor healthcare seminars for BIPOC community and create an annual health and wellness day. 2, co-sponsor healthcare provider training and issues that impact the BIPOC community. 3, create a resource list of BIPOC healthcare providers, BIPOC health organizations, among others. 4, fund local organization for patient access to healthcare and healthcare provider training. 5, create a mechanism that would provide a medical professional to respond to calls pertaining to mental health and other medical issues in lieu of a police response. 6, create a booklet describing and celebrating all faiths in our community, including religious celebrations, participation information, and ancillary services offered by the interfaith community. 7, hold monthly or periodic interfaith gatherings to share experiences, pray together, and create relationships among those of different faiths. 8, hold a seminar on environmental justice and its relationship to racism. 9, partner with organizations like Neighbors Link to educate workers on environmental hazards in the course of their jobs. 10, create partnerships with local environmental, conservation, and other social justice organizations and policymakers to collect ideas and collaborate on environmental justice initiatives. 11, conduct periodic testing of site air and noise quality for environmental hazards. 12, create a police chief's advisory board to include some members from CRE to bring any BIPOC issues to light that pertain to law enforcement. 13, participate in the Governor's Police Reform Task Force. 14, allow access to a police officer's misconduct history. So the partnership priorities that the CREI has established are as follows. Healthcare. The CREI will explore the potential for healthcare seminars directed toward BIPOC communities. The committee will also reach out to healthcare provider networks to determine whether training on issues that impact the BIPOC community exists. Finally, the CREI will create a resource list of BIPOC healthcare providers and healthcare-focused organizations. Interfaith connections. The CREI will coordinate periodic, potentially seasonal interfaith gatherings, where individuals of different faiths can share experiences, pray together, and establish mutually supportive relationships. Law enforcement. The CREI supports open communication on issues that the BIPOC community may face related to law enforcement and would like to learn more about the platform or representatives currently available to raise these issues with the Newcastle Police. And then finally, we have environmental racial justice. The CREI will coordinate to offer a presentation on environmental racial justice to the community to provide critical context to discussions around development and other off-race town debates. In recognition that BIPOC workers constitute the majority of the workforce in trades that pose particular environmental hazards, the CREI will determine what educational resources are available through local nonprofit organizations and will seek to enhance the same if gaps are identified. Finally, the CREI will encourage the town to conduct periodic testing to ensure a safe environment at low-income housing sites. And the last section of recommendations is for the town administration. So from the previous CRE, 1, metrics and transparency. Implement policy of collecting, maintaining, and publishing racial demographic of town committees and boards. 2, anti-racism and white supremacy training. Expand training beyond anti-harassment and anti-violence to include anti-racism and white supremacy training for the town employees and administration, as well as volunteer and statutory board members. 3, Town of Newcastle DE&I strategic plan. Develop a Town of Newcastle DE&I strategic plan and annual strategic planning process, broadened to include town committees and commissions. 4, retain paid part-time employee to serve as equity officer. To have a town employee specifically dedicated to monitor compliance with all DE&I initiatives to be implemented in town, including without limitation, new anti-racist training and monitoring compliance with procurement policy. This individual can also collect any unlawful discrimination complaints from employees and community with resolution strategies. 5, we recommend the town of Newcastle set a DE&I maturity ambition of strategic, parenthetical, setting a DE&I ambition will define a current state, future state gap that will need to be closed. 6, workplace climate. Conduct an employee engagement climate survey and develop an action plan to respond to the findings. 7, workforce recruiting. Implement best practices, update job applications to include voluntary requests to self-identify, to attract and recruit qualified and diverse talent for administrative, managerial, and non-civil service positions. 8, town website, statutory and town boards. Increase information provided to all residents about statutory and voluntary town boards. Keep town website updated, increase circulation of town newsletter, post any town committee or board openings in the town newsletter and social media pages, post openings on CRE social media using the town newsletter email list to do direct email blasts for any openings. 9, application form update. Include demographics. Update board and committee application form to include voluntary requests for demographic information on application and equal opportunity statement. 10, maintain interested resident list. Maintain a list of residents expressing interest on town board committees. When a vacancy occurs, additional direct email outreach to them. 11, board vacancy notification and selection process. Implement policy requiring boards to post every vacancy and with every posting a statement encouraging BIPOC and women to apply. Required screening of all applicants expressing interest. 12, statutory and volunteer board term limits. Engage town attorney to review amendment to governing documents of town boards and committees to impose term limits on statutory and voluntary boards. And 13, engage town attorney to explore reducing the terms of statutory boards to no more than 3 years. 14, improving conditions for participation in committees and boards. Make better use of technology such as Zoom calls for all town committees and boards as an alternative to attending in-person meetings. Also, the town committees and board aim to create meeting conditions that will enable more people in town to participate, such as limiting the length of meeting times and schedule meetings at times when a maximum number of people can participate. 15, BIPOC participation rate goal in statutory and volunteer boards. Engage town attorney to review feasibility of instituting affirmative action resolution to increase total qualified BIPOC serving on boards and committees with goal of achieving 10% BIPOC representation. 16, political party statement of unity promoting BIPOC participation. Encourage nominating committees to issue a unity/affirmative action statement setting forth its commitment to equity and inclusion and encouraging BIPOC and women to increase their participation on the committees. 17, employee policy handbook language. Edit to use gender-neutral language and broaden language to be more inclusive. 18, review and modify appearance policy. Evaluate ability to modify personal appearance question on town employee evaluation, union and non-union, so not as subjective. If there is a town dress code for union/non-union employee, can simply ask whether employee complies with the same. If no dress code should be implemented, so no ambiguity as to appropriateness. 19, land acknowledgement statement. We recommend that the town create a land acknowledgement statement, which is a formal statement presented at the beginning of public events and gatherings that recognizes and honors Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of the land. So from these, we have drawn the following town administration priorities for the current CREI. The CREI recommends that the town create a strategic plan to promote and expand diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Newcastle community, with a defined timeline and goal to foster a culture of belonging. The CREI would support the town board and administration in setting a vision and creating an implementation plan. The CREI will also advocate for race, equity, and inclusion training as a complement to existing anti-harassment and anti-violence training for town employees and administration, as well as volunteer and statutory board members. This training should include consideration of bias in the hiring process, with an emphasis on expanding the potential hiring pool rather than looking to current employees' immediate networks to hire. The CREI believes these are crucial steps in a necessary effort to make the town administration a more inviting environment for BIPOC applicants. The CREI will encourage the town to clearly state and reiterate a commitment to diverse representation within the administration and on committees and statutory boards. Where diversity and inclusion issues arise in the workplace within the town, the committee members offer themselves as a resource available to administrative employees as well as to committee and statutory board members. The CREI encourages the town to consider conducting an employee engagement/climate survey and developing an action plan to respond to the findings. The CREI recommends that the town review the language used in the employee policy handbook to ensure gender-neutral and inclusive terms are used. We encourage this expansive approach to crafting all town policymaking and communications. Finally, the CREI recommends that the town create a land acknowledgement statement, recognizing and honoring Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of the land, determining a framework for the statement's use with the CREI's assistance if needed. And that concludes our review of the previous CRE recommendations. In the appendix, we have our full mission statement and also our personal bios for your review as you have time. And we thank you for the time to present and welcome any questions.
That's also available.
The PowerPoint.
Presentation, right?
Yeah, can we can get a copy of that?
We have it.
No, I mean the town
Incredible.
board. Yeah.
It's really
Um,
tremendous.
Well, like I said, they've been working incredibly hard, so I think
Thank you
that
for
you have seen that today, so.
Absolutely.
That was amazing, and you did a lot of work in the short time since you've all been seated, so thank you. I personally thought all of your priorities were spot on and wanna look at all of those and work with the CREI in implementing as many as we possibly can. I would also add, I think it was on there, but it would be great to get a calendar of events and not every event, but like Black History Month, you know, things that we want to make sure that we're honoring in town. That would be useful so that we can plan things in advance
Yes,
as well.
absolutely. So that is in our priorities. It came early on, so you might not remember, but yes, it's one of our
And we
priorities.
kind of started and we have our editor.
It's not done yet.
But we are exploring
No, it
to
takes a while.
yeah, we're exploring
Well.
to incorporate different elements for celebration
Absolutely.
for celebrating those important heritage months and important holidays.
It's one of the collaborations with the PTA as well, because they do a great job of distributing on a monthly basis what they're gonna do and what they do in the schools and what's important for the kids. And it's one way that we can really work together with them as well to make sure we're all on the same page.
That's
So
great.
I had one thought, just
Sure.
probably for this board. I'm thinking back to when President Biden, after he was sworn in, and one of the first executive orders was to sort of create a DEI initiative across executive branch. And I'm just thinking through everything you discussed, there's so much integration and overlap with other boards, the Rec Commission, probably mostly, but the BAB, the list goes on. And I'm just thinking, should we have a liaison situation the way we do, for example, between conservation and rec, where there's, sort of an interaction on a monthly basis so that both sides know what the other's doing. And I'm just thinking that it's obviously more work for the folks on the boards, but that might be a really helpful way to seamlessly and from the beginning start to integrate all of these principles in what the rest of the town boards are doing, the advisory boards are doing. So that would be a suggestion, a broader suggestion that I'd love to see us do at some point, which is to have more collective collaboration across all the boards. We had talked about this a few months ago about having, a semi-regular check-in and then discussions among all the heads of the boards, like the heads of the 5 families, right? That sort of thing. But I just think in this case, a liaison situation might be super helpful, because there's so much opportunity to integrate in everything else. So just a
Yeah,
thought.
I think that's a great idea, Chris,
I do too.
coordinating. Yeah, I mean, we've talked within the committee about partnering with other stakeholder groups in the community, but this is about partnering even within the town itself, and so I think that's a great idea.
And I just think, there's so many situations where someone has an idea. I mean, we've seen this before, you have an idea, but then by the time you get to Ike Kuzio, their calendar's set and staffing is set, and it's like, well, maybe we can start to think about that next year. But if there's like an implanted relationship at the get-go, it could really be helpful. So,
And also the CREI, some of your mission overlaps with some of our other committees, so the LGBTQ committee or our EPIC committee.
Yes.
We have committees that are and even our Holocaust and Human Rights Committee, we have a lot of committees that are focused very specifically, but together you all really encompass, equity and inclusion. So it would be great to also work together, because you may be planning an event and not realize that they're planning a similar event, and so to have a group where you all meet together once a month, whatever it may be, to flesh those out, because certainly to put all the onus on you, for instance, to run events is difficult when there are other groups who also may wanna run similar events.
Sure. Yeah, we had been looking forward to reaching out to the other committees, so it would be nice to have sort of a formalized setup for that.
Okay,
great.
we can work on helping to put that
That's
together.
great. Yeah, thank you.
As soon as you can let me know about your calendar, that would be really helpful.
Yes, I
That would be a great place to start, just because I know the library's got a little bit of upheaval there, but they traditionally have programs that we've run with and run in conjunction with. So the library is a great resource in addition to the PTA, and also we've got rec. So if we could take and sort of corral those groups together, fabulous. We would look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And also,
you so much.
I just wanna say one more thing, I just wanna to name, and maybe I should have done that at the beginning, but I just wanna name all of the committee members, by name to acknowledge everyone and their work. Of course, we have Superna, Banerjee and Larry Liu as co-chairs, and we have Kimberly Carey, we have Sean Smith here today, we have Youngju Yoon, Pat Pollack, and Porfirio Gonzowitz. So I just wanted to acknowledge all the individuals on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're also looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow night at the Volunteer Appreciation Day.
Oh, yes, we're
To
very
show
much
our
looking forward to
appreciation
that.
for all the work that you've been doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if you could, Jill, whoever has that PowerPoint, if you could send it to me, because I'm gonna
I
wanna put.
forwarded it.
Oh, perfect.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank
I
you.
have it too.
Thank you. Really, thank you all for your really hard work, and we're looking forward to moving forward on a lot of these. Great, thank you.
John gets lonely.
All right, so let's move to the administrative items.
Yeah, we've got a couple of things.
Thank you.
I didn't wanna keep them any longer, but there's just two things I wanted to mention to the board. First off is that today Dan Rubino, the town's electrician, swapped out the temporary emergency generator that had been at the Millwood water treatment plant. The exchange of these two rentals will result in a monthly reduction of over $10,000.
Oh,
If you
that's
recall, the
great.
board approved a subsequent rental which was, $20,000 as opposed to $33,600 per month. We're hoping by the end of the month that we will be coming back to the board for authorization to purchase a new one, and we're hoping to get the new one within a year, but certainly the savings of $120,000 over that time will be tremendous.
Yes.
And the next thing I wanted to mention was that on last Wednesday, October 26th, the town's consultant Arcadis presented the hydraulic model for the Newcastle water distribution system. This actually dates back to 2019, is when the project started, March of 2019. If you're into this stuff, it's really pretty interesting, but it is a computer model that mimics the water flow and volume that goes through our water distribution system. We presented it to the fire departments. So we had Bart Carey, our Commissioner of Public Works, Chris Lupo, our Superintendent of the Water Unit, John Maduris, Assistant General Foreman, and Robbie Bancroft, who's our Fire Marshal. And we were joined by, from the Chappaqua Fire Department, Chief Paul Iden, Greg Bologna, who's the First Assistant Chief, Greg Lang, the Second Assistant Chief, and members of the Millwood Fire Department, including First Assistant Chief George Rodriguez, Captain Greg Santone, Dan Polska, and Fire Commissioner Alan Shapiro. And it was really fascinating. It's going to be posted online. There's a PowerPoint presentation. But the model actually accurately reflects 132 miles of water distribution piping, and it's 1,342 fire hydrants. So it was a phenomenal amount of work, and again, it's one of those foundational studies that we will be able to use to get grant funding for improvements going forward. So it was a great program, and thanks to everybody who contributed, and a special thanks to Tiffany, who made sure that no glitches and the Zoom went off like a charm. So thanks very much to everybody involved.
Great, thanks.
Okay, and then to the administrative items. So we've got a payment of claims. We've got authorization to adopt a local law regarding amendment to Chapter 65, which is the town code regarding filming. We did receive one public comment the board saw. We've got authorization to set a public hearing on the 2023 budget. That's going to be for November 29th. Authorization to obtain bids for resurfacing of the Millwood Park tennis courts. This is part of the SAM grant that we received, so it's part of the improvements that are coming down.
Do you, just related to that, so I know part of the issue, aside from resurfacing, is that given kind of the foliage around those courts, if it gets damp, it never seems to dry.
Yeah, we're removing those trees. The two trees were either removed or they're going to be removed because it's not just the foliage that covers it. The roots that's actually what the buckling of the court is, it's the roots of the trees.
Got it.
So there are two catalpa trees, I think they're called, that had to be removed.
Got it, okay.
It literally just held the moisture.
Yeah,
They got moldy.
I know.
Let's see, We've got authorization to purchase a PLC system upgrades and parts from NIC. This is all part of the SCADA system that controls the Millwood Water Treatment Plant. And authorization to accept the proposal for a chat pack property line survey. As the board is aware, we are trying very hard to basically close on the property. The chat pack. We need to own it in order to receive some grant funding that we're in line for, so we're moving right along with that. And that's all we've got, that and the resolution that we talked about earlier. Okay?
Excellent. Thank you.
And just one last housekeeping, we do not have a meeting on November 15th. So there are 5 Tuesdays in November and we only meet on 4, so this year it's just one smack in the middle of the month. So, okay, I will remind you as we go, but I just wanted to put it out there.
And don't forget about our event tomorrow night,
Yes.
the volunteer
Be there, be square.
recognition event. Be nice and fun. Alright, so let's let us move to our resolutions. Who would like to start?
I'm happy to. Payment of claims?
Sure.
I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $797,269.90 listed in the summary pre-check writing report and detailed voucher detail report, both dated October 28th, 2022. Checks will be printed and distributed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry I laughed, but I just remember joking with Ally last week about how that's a jumble of words.
I've always wanted to say the words out of order.
I know,
Pre-check, pre-check, and detail, detail.
Okay, I move to authorize the posting for the position of laborer 0425-05 within the Recreation and Parks Department with an annual salary of $48,055.31.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. To do one more?
Yeah.
I move to adopt a local law to amend chapter 65 of the Code of the Town of Newcastle concerning filming.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. Do one more?
Sure, finish the page.
I move to set a public hearing on the 2023 budget for the town of Newcastle for November 29th, 2022 at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter as practicable at Newcastle Town Hall Assembly Room.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, so
Right,
well done.
Ally.
Alright, here we go.
You don't have to read all the whereas clauses. You can just move, right? Is that right? You can just move to the
So I just say the
resolution.
top part, I move to adopt the resolution in support of the Village of Austining Drinking Water Source Protection Plan.
And then the resolution part on the next page.
Therefore, be it resolved that the Newcastle Town Board agrees to cooperate and work with the Village of Austining to implement the DWSP2, provided that implementation of the recommendation does not impact public safety and that any financial impact resulting from implementation of a recommendation be submitted to the Newcastle Town Board for approval prior to the town board's involvement in implementing such, and be it also resolved that this local policy shall be effective immediately upon adoption by the Newcastle Town Board, and a copy of this resolution shall be provided to the Development Department, the Department of Public Works, the Comptroller's Office, and the Town Clerk.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Poor Ally here.
I move to adopt the resolution to approve a land swap, Augusta 45 North Way of 0.60 acres of privately owned land located at 45 North Way with 0.60 acres of town-owned parkland along North Way. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Newcastle hereby approves the land swap described herein. Be it further resolved that the town board hereby authorizes the supervisor to execute all documents necessary to effectuate the purpose of this resolution. Be it further resolved that any and all documents and or plats prepared for the purposes of or in connection with the conveyances of real property contemplated by this resolution shall be reviewed and approved by the town attorney. Be it further resolved that this resolution is subject to permissive referendum in accordance New York Town Law Section 64, section 2 and 90, and the procedures outlined in New York Town Law 91. Be it further resolved that the town clerk is hereby authorized to publish and post a notice within 10 days from the date of this resolution, which shall set forth the date of the adoption of this resolution and contain an abstract of the resolution concisely stating the purpose and effect thereof and indicating that this resolution is subject to a permissive referendum. Be it further resolved, the town board requests the town attorney and town engineer process an application for subdivision approval with the Town of Newcastle Planning Board and hereby authorizes the town administrator to execute all documents necessary to effectuate the subdivision application.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, this is-
Ed, do you wanna?
If there are any questions, we didn't have an executive session tonight. I hope the resolution is self-explanatory, but if okay.
All right, authorized to commence a third-party action in reference to an alleged defective sidewalk condition where ELQ is not a party to this. Therefore, be it resolved pursuant to New York Town Law Section 65, the town board hereby authorizes the commencement of a third-party action against ELQ Industries in the aforementioned litigation.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we also have this resolution about the wetlands. If anyone wants to read that one.
This is a resolution in support of Assembly Bill A 9079, Senate Bill S 8378, amending the environmental conservation law by adding a new section pertaining to local freshwater wetlands pesticide prohibitions. Whereas New York State Assembly Bill A 9079 sponsored by Assemblymember Chris Burdick and Senator Peter Harcum in the state senate seeks to amend the environmental conservation law to restore certain home rule rights to local governments. And whereas the legislation is further detailed in the resolution, and whereas wetlands protection is critical to the town of Newcastle to protect drinking water and to provide floodplains protection. Now therefore be it resolved by the town of Newcastle that the town board does hereby support Bill number A 9079 S 8378. The town board urges Governor Kathy Hochul to sign this critical legislation, and that a copy of this resolution be sent to the office of the governor, Senator Harcum, Assembly Member Burdick, Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins, Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, County Executive George Latimer, Sustainable Westchester, and the Westchester Municipal Officials Association.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, anything else? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
See
All right,
everybody
thank
tomorrow
you,
night?
everybody.
Sweet.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
You were late. Vic baked for us.
No,
Come on, you have
no,
to have
I
them.
do not
Why?
have-
They're the best